Welcome to the 27, the podcast where one teacher talks with one student about the MCU. I'm the teacher, Mr. McCaughey, and joining us today to wrap up Moon Knight with episodes 5 and 6 is Andre. Welcome, Andre. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Very well. You are just up from Fawn rehearsal. We're about a month and change out. How are you feeling about the show?
Oh, man, I'm so excited.
Ready to go?
Ready to see how everything turns out, yeah.
Have you done Fawn all 4 years?
I skipped sophomore year because it was COVID, but other than that, yeah.
All right, very good. How's senior year going?
Now that we're past most of the college app stuff, I'm feeling much more relaxed, ready for the second semester.
I was saying, Irene, we're on the verge of your last semester of high school. That's a start.
Man, it's crazy. I can't believe we went through the first semester so quickly, though.
Time, I mean, it's like a cliche. Time does fly. You have milestones within each school year. Traditionally, it's for me, Thanksgiving is one, and then that winter break.
Oh, yeah.
And then after that, it goes. It'll be, we come back, we got 3 weeks, and then winter break.
Oh, yeah.
Midwinter break, and then we go from there. Well, enjoy the rest of your senior year. Treasure it. You're back from senior trip. You had fun?
Oh, yeah. But very much had fun.
Yeah, it was a fun group of people, a fun place. But we are back, and we are finishing up Moon Knight. We've done our first couple episodes. You can go back and find those on the Classic YouTube channel or on Spotify and wherever else you get your podcast. But now we're wrapping it up. Only 6 episodes.
Yeah.
Was it too short, do you think?
I think of it's short but sweet. They gave us a sort of overload of information in the episodes that they gave us, but I feel like it was put forth in a way that it was fast paced but not too fast paced for me, at least.
Yeah, and not too crammed.
Yeah.
There's a lot happening, but yeah, I would agree with you that it's not too much. I think that was my critique of Falcon and the Winter Soldier was that it was also 6, but there was just way too much happening.
Yeah, I agree.
That definitely. It could have been spread out, but also I think it was just trimming stuff out of that probably would have served it better. But we're going to talk about episode 5 and 6. Episode 5 entitled Asylum. Episode 6, the finale, Gods and Monsters. I feel like you see this a lot in TV shows. The penultimate episode is sometimes filler, just it's almost like you catch your breath before you get into the finale.
Oh, yeah.
I know WandaVision kind of did that, and because we have similar setting up the full backstory. It's almost you have your first 4 episodes, then you get the full backstory to fill in the details before you get into the finale. And that's what we see here with getting the story of, really how Steven came to be and who Mark is, and everything along those lines. Simple question. No, it's not a simple question. I don't know why I framed it like that. Is the asylum real? Is it some type of post-death? We're left with Mark getting shot by Harrow, and then that episode ends. Episode 4 ends with I know we need to have my notes. Our hippopotamus god.
Oh, yes, Taweret.
Kind of showing up there in the asylum. So what do we think? What is this asylum?
I remember them saying it was something sort of similar to the ancestral plane from Black Panther.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that it's just there's a bunch of different planes of existence in the afterlife, and that's just one of them.
And it's one of 3 places where this episode takes place. We have a little bit of what we'll just call the real world. Then we have the asylum, but then the other, which really reminds me of the ancestral plane, which is the ship making its way to our field, the
field of reeds.
The field of reeds, absolutely. This episode is called Asylum. It could have just been called Trauma, because it essentially sets up where we will get the genesis of Mark's dissociative identity disorder, the death of his brother, and then the subsequent abuse and neglect by his mother. What do we think about how Steven came to be and kind of Mark's background story here?
I feel in general for the episode, it was just a huge shift in tone. We see Steven's the funny, wacky guy trying to figure himself out, and it gets towards the darker tone. But this, I feel really takes a darker turn when you see the background story of Mark and how his brother died and everything like that. And I feel I was very interested in how they portrayed going through the backstory and just going through all these different rooms and all the distinct memories that Mark has that associates with his his relationship with his mother, as well as how his father responded to that sort of relationship. But yeah, I felt like there was just a big shift in this episode.
And it was all in an attempt to essentially balance their hearts on the scales going on the ship there. Yeah, and it's interesting when you think about like a parental relationship and the fact that both of his parents would obviously be grieving the loss of the brother, but the father seems to have to be doing the double duty, if you will, of like compensating for also, the grief that the mother is going through.
Yeah, I felt that it was interesting seeing the mom portrayed as like the abuser. Usually you sort of see the father figure as sort of this like overwhelming figure, but I feel like the father tried, he like really tried to help Mark get through this time and, dealing with all of his stuff with his mother. And I also felt what's really interesting is that Steven is sort of like in the same position we are. We're finding out like the same time he is. So like just seeing it through, like seeing Steven find out while we find out at the same time, I thought that was an interesting thing.
And he's finding out like how and why he exists, right?
Yeah.
Which is just got to be kind of a trip anyway. Like, not realizing that you are just one part of this person that's basically been created through this trauma. And the viewing of the movie Tomb Buster with Dr. Stephen Grant being the character in it. The one critique I had was like the mother was like a bit of a cliche, like with the alcohol and like it was a little too on the nose when it comes to kind of that. But I mean, she's brutal with him in terms of like, think about having kids and actually like literally pointing the finger, like this is your fault that this happens. I mean, I think we see where that dissociative identity disorder comes from. But yeah, I mean, a lot going on in this. I like what you pointed out there, the journey of it, that each room kind of tells a little bit of the story.
Yeah, I also found it like kind of funny. There was this part where Steven realized that he was made up, so he like punches Mark for it, but he like retracts back. He's like, "Ow,"
Yeah.
So I thought it was like a little. I get the emphasis of it, but I thought it was like a little funny not to just emphasize that Mark is like the physically stronger one still. But you could see like obviously why Steven would be upset with all of this coming out so suddenly.
And this kind of is Steven and Mark finally being able to almost come to peace with one another, coexist. That going forward, like it's not the earlier episodes. There's a lot of like, let me take control of the body or give me the power here. But after this, we kind of see that both of them kind of coexist with each other, which moves us into episode 6, Gods and Monsters. And there's obviously a lot going on here where, there's the season finale, potentially the series finale. Have you seen anything or heard anything about a series 2 for this?
I mean, I feel like the way that they set it up, like with the introduction of the other identity at the end, I feel like there should be a season 2 being planned, but yeah, I don't think there's been any news about that.
That's the thing from looking at it, and that's what I think it screams for season 2. And we'll talk about the introduction of Jake there towards the end. But yeah, nothing as of yet. I'm reading into it. Oscar Isaac just signed like this one series deal. He didn't necessarily get a a lot of times with these movies you sign a 3-movie contract or a multiple series deal. But this does definitely. He just signed that one, so we'll see where he ends up here. Mark, after going through the house and getting through everything. Oh, by the way, with the father too, we see, when his mother dies and they're sitting Shiva, like he can't get into the house. He can't bring himself to enter the house. He's out on the street, drinking out of a flask, and his dad's just kind of begging him to come back. A lot for that dad. I didn't really think of that until you said it. Really had to balance a lot between his wife and his kids.
No, what I thought was interesting was when you see the switch, he immediately tries and calls his mom. So
yes.
I was wondering the whole time, who is he calling in reality? Because he is calling someone.
Yeah,
right?
and that's why from doing some reading on it, I saw someone say that like if you were to look at the phone, it looks like it's dead, or like it looks like it's not in basically call mode, if you will. But yeah, I don't know, because he's definitely in those earlier episodes, he's calling it, and that kind of throws it off with Layla too, when he says like, "Oh, I called my mother earlier" or something, and she knows the fact that she's dead at that point. Yeah, but who was that? That is interesting, but I think that phone might have been dead there. They do balance the scales after all that work, and he gets into the field of reeds with Steven making the ultimate sacrifice and kind of falling off the ship.
Yeah, I was sort of just like surprised by that, but at the same time, it's Marvel. It's sort of like getting predictable. Like they're not just gonna kill them both off, or not just kill Steven off and just have nothing come back from that. So, but I mean, it was a pretty heartbreaking scene to just see them leaving each other for the first time since their like inception of like being together all the time. you
Yeah,
know?
and Steven essentially sacrificed himself. There's this kind of like fight that is happening as they're, whatever. I'll just use the word monster is kind of trying to pull
Oh
them
yeah,
off the
that was
ship.
great too.
But yeah, Steven ends up there. He kind of gets frozen. The ship goes on, and Mark does end up in the field of reeds where he's told that now you have the peace you always wanted but never had, right? And I think of this man who has gone through this trauma, end up with this like multiple personality, discovering all that, and he finally gets that peace, and he notices like how quiet it is there, and it's almost too much for him, and he decides to leave.
Yeah, but I was wondering, like, because we obviously see at the end that it's revealed he has a third identity. So I was wondering how that identity sort of went undetected, unless it did manifest like after the fact. But the thing is, Khonshu does know who this identity is,
and he's the most useful for Khonshu, because Jake is just like a cold-blooded like killer, right? He doesn't have kind of the doubt that Steven may have, or the desire to kind of serve his term the way Mark does. There's a couple things I noticed in that Asylum episode. One, there was one that I noticed and one I read about after the fact. When he's walking through, when I guess Steven is walking through, or maybe it was Mark, they see these like sarcophagus, like these caskets, essentially, if you will, that are in there. There's one that that Steven was in, but there's another one that is unopened in that episode. That's kind of bouncing back and forth. There are some people that said that Jake was in there, and then another one that Steven kind of like slips into this like violent, he has this violent look on his face that he's going to potentially kill Harrow when they're kind of uncovering all this in the therapy in the asylum, and that might have been a little bit of a glimpse into it as well. He goes back and saves the person who saved him on the ship, and I wonder if for Mark this is now the opportunity to save the brother he couldn't save in the cave.
I definitely see the parallels with that, Steven is literally his other half, and, growing up, he wasn't able to rectify the sacrifice, or not the sacrifice, but the death of his brother. Yeah. So I feel like this is sort of his own redemption for what had happened earlier. So
despite the fact that now, he's gone through just say 20, 30 years of living, with voices in his head, and now he has this quiet, he gives it up for, that shot at redemption to save the brother that he couldn't save. We end up with a pretty good battle scene. We have Amit versus Khonshu, the Avatar versus Avatar, and we learn of the Scarlet Scarab. Any thoughts on Layla becoming the Scarlet Scarab as the Avatar of Taweret?
Yeah, I wonder if she's really going to stay as that role as the Avatar, but I really liked the costumes in this scene. I really liked the weaponry. I felt that it was all very unique, especially Moon Knight. I like his little like the moon shurikens, I guess I would call them. Those are really cool. I liked Layla's weapon too. I like the wings.
The wings are
very
great.
Falcon-esque.
Absolutely.
But I feel like they did a very good job of having really good costumes that fit into the theme and are able to be used like in combat effectively,
Absolutely. Amit ends up getting locked away again, but this time essentially shoved down the throat of Harrow, who ends up in an asylum. This we believe is this is a real asylum that does exist. It's not the one that we see in episode 5, but this is a real one that exists. And then we see him get checked out of the asylum with our mid-credit scene here. He's brought out. What happens to him, Andre?
I'm pretty sure he just gets wheeled out and like brought into the limo with Khonshu and Jake at the end.
And then Jake, have you read these comics, or do you know?
No,
I knew nothing of. Yeah, no,
I'm going into this blind as well.
And then I believe Jake's job is that he's like a taxi driver in this.
I see.
So now he's this limo driver. Mark has the chance to kill Harrow. Should he have done that? This is before they kind of put Amit back in. Should he have killed him at this point?
I mean, I feel like at this point he's just so tired of killing. We see that he remembers pretty much every one of his victims, and he didn't want to add to that list again.
That's fair. And so he doesn't do it, but Jake does. He gets in the back of the limousine. Khonshu, like you said, is there, and he ends up shooting him. And as we said, this does scream for season 2. Where does Jake go from here? In the same way that Steven realizes Mark is real when he has these blackouts and he's chaining himself to the bed, so on and so forth, will Mark not also realize that Jake exists when he starts to not be able to account for time in the same way that this is how we discovered that Steven discovers that Mark exists.
I mean, I feel like the problem with that is that maybe either one is just going to assume it was the other one that was taking up that time, unless they do like openly communicate like, oh, how did we end up here? What were you doing? You know, because there are some times where they're both sort of in the body and they're like one's in the conscience and one is like physically controlling the body and they're able to like see what's going on. But in the moments that they're not with that, then they'll probably have to like communicate afterwards, like, oh, how did we end up here? Was it you? You know?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like they're going to do a good job of figuring out how to portray the next season.
You figure it has to come around for how popular this was and for how much this is, how much appears left unsaid or yet to be told. I think we're looking at a season 2, so we'll see. Bigger picture with this, it's interesting thinking about where the MCU is going. You were on the Shang-Chi episode last year. There's a certain element of celestial beings or, like kind of like God-type things. We see this also in Eternals, and now we see it here. Like there seems to be some type of shift towards that idea of celestials or gods or something that's just bigger than what's happening here on Earth.
Yeah, I know that in the comics there's a lot of celestial beings, like even more powerful than the ones we already know of. So I feel like they are going to push towards that direction to like have these new heroes face these bigger and badder, villains.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited for that, but I'm also feeling very wary about it because out of Phase 4, I haven't really been catching up. I've heard really not so nice things about the movies. Like, for example, I tried watching Thor: Love and Thunder.
Yeah.
I see where they were going with like the God Killer type of thing, but I felt like they could have done a more serious tone with that, like they have with Moon Knight.
Yeah.
But if they do take it in a direction where they enter like where they introduce characters like Galactus and like the One Above All, I feel like they're gonna have to do a really, really good job to appease like comic fans and other fans of Marvel.
Yeah, and hopefully that's just maybe a one-off with Love and Thunder, because we've talked about it where Love and Thunder just seemed to try to repeat the things that were great about Ragnarok, just kind of like some of the different things. But it's like you can't go back to the well on that, right? And like I think they tried to do that, but the result is like what you said and what many have said, that it's just almost a little too silly. Like it's not serious enough. But as you said, as we talk about these greater beings, these kind of higher powers, maybe that will lend itself more towards it. All right. Well, overall, this is the third series we've done, and this is really good. I really like this one. Out of the 3, I think I got Falcon and the Winter Soldier kind of as a number 3. It was fine.
Yeah, I agree.
I liked WandaVision though. I did like WandaVision.
Yeah, so out of those 3, I feel that my top personally would be Moon Knight, although WandaVision is really good. I see it being people's number 1. I just enjoyed Moon Knight a little bit more, mostly because of the combat aspects of it. So I'd put that at number 1, WandaVision number 2, Falcon and the Winter Soldier as number 3 for me.
Yeah, I could see that. I think WandaVision, so just the story of it is so unique. I think it might appeal to people that way, and that like this does offer some of the things though. It's not just the straightforward kind of superhero villain type thing. Just even the incorporation, we mentioned this in the last episode, of like mental illness and issues, being presented like that. It gives something a little bit different there. So, overall, I definitely enjoyed this. The best parts for me, like Oscar Isaac was just fantastic.
Oh my gosh, I love him. He's such a great actor. I like how we when we see the parts where he's actively switching between Steven and Mark, his accents change so quickly and it like sort of seamlessly. I really love that.
You could break it down where like you could say he played like almost 4 different people here between Mark, Steven, we have Jake at the end. He conjures Khonshu in one of the earlier episodes. So, I mean, I'm just surprised. Like, I usually don't pay attention to, like, Emmys or Golden Globes or things like that. But his acting was deserving of some type of recognition.
I agree.
I think the directing of the episodes was good. We mentioned the last one, this commitment to authenticity. There was Egyptian, producers were involved just to give it a little bit more, authenticity, right? That it's not just like some outsiders making this story about Egypt, but actually having people with that voice contributing to it.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering like how accurate that sort of aspect to it was, but I'm also really glad that they're branching out into different cultures and like seeing more exposure within the Marvel universe, and just Disney in general. They had Ryan the Last Dragon go to Southeast Asia. Now we have Moon Knight going into Middle East, Egypt type of area. And I just hope they just continue like branching off like with more characters, more different backgrounds, and like for the Into the Spider-Verse Part 2, I know they're gonna have the Spider-Man from India.
Okay.
So I'm really happy for Disney and Marvel as a company just branching out. I feel like it's the start of something. It's gonna be really good.
It's always that idea that representation matters.
Yeah.
And the people who don't feel that way are the people who are represented everywhere, and that's not the important voice there. Last thing on Marvel before we go, shout out Angela Bassett, first ever performance to receive an Oscar nomination from an MCU movie. So she was nominated for Wakanda Forever. So, that's pretty awesome to, we have seen nominations mostly for visual type things. Black Panther, the first one was nominated for Best Picture, but first acting performance. So shout out to Angela Bassett for that.
Shout out Angela Bassett.
There you go. Okay, well, I think we did it, Andre. I think I enjoyed it. I might still put WandaVision first. I got to sit back and think about this. I think I'll have to do a little retrospective at the end of the year. But this was definitely, I really enjoyed this. Definitely liked it. So that's it. We are the 27. You can find us on Instagram at the 27THHS. Find us on the Classic YouTube channel, the Classic Critic. Go check out all the awesome work that they're doing over there. Watch Operation Tomato Meter, see everything, all their reviews as well. Thanks to Irene, our producer, for her excellent
Thank you, Irene.
work. We got our video editor, Ryan, getting some work done for us
Thank you,
as
Ryan.
well. Thank you, Ryan. Next week, our guest, it's a one-on-one with Mr. Gelman.
Oh yeah.
That is going to be something. I don't know. I mean, very unpredictable gentleman, that Mr. Gelman. What he will do in front of this microphone, we shall see. But that'll be a good one. We'll talk about just his interest in the MCU. I think we're going to try to maybe rank some of the franchises. What is the best franchise, right, in terms of the overall movie. So we'll put that together. That'll be next week. But until we see you then, Andre, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see everyone next week on the 27th. Take care.